I'm about to sell this lens, and I figured before I do that, let's do a quick review on it. And what lens is it though? This is the 16-35 f4 Zeiss lens from Sony. It's a great lens, but it's an f4. But don't let that bother you, because if you do landscape or real estate, this is gonna be a great lens. But don't buy it new, because you can pick it up for between $400 to $500 on KEH, Adorama, websites like that that sell used gear, because it goes for almost $1,000 new, and it's been like 10 years since this thing came out. So let's dive into it and just talk about why you should get this lens if you're a real estate or a landscape photographer. So you can see how clean and how crisp that lens is, and look at it right there, 72mm filtered thread. And it's nice and clean because I just cleaned it because I'm selling it tomorrow. But here's the thing. It's only 518 grams, 518. So it's super light. This is an iPhone 13, and this is just the size comparison, right? If I put them right next to each other, you can see it's a pretty small lens, you know? This will fit in your pocket, so obviously this is smaller than that. So not that you want something like this in your pocket, but you get where I'm coming from with the size difference. So next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take it outside. So now we're on the 16-35. Let's take some photos, do some video quick, and see what it looks like. Now we're at an f4, 24 frames a second. And you might notice a little bit of difference in clarity. So now we're at an f8, 24 frames a second, and you can kind of see what this is like.
Let's jump into the images I got. And as you can see, I have not really edited these, because one of the things I hate sometimes is when you go and you're looking at a lens review and the images look like they're too edited and you don't actually get to see like what it's like coming out of the camera. So sometimes that bothers me. So I didn't want to do that. With this one, I wanted y'all to see what it was like. Obviously, you can see where I did some over here, right? The exposure, the shadows, things like that, because I was in a shady area and I needed to up those just to kind of get the histogram to where it needed to be, right? Because you kind of want it to be more in this center area, so that way it's a well-balanced image. So I was trying to do that without being over the top with it. One of the things I wish I would have done was put a subject here in the center area, just so we could see how the clarity looks and how the bokeh looks in it. But I didn't do that because this is my first lens review. So I'll live and learn and take some notes, so that way when I do the next one, it looks a lot better. So one of the things you can kind of see is how good it does look in the center of the image in here, right? And you can see over here that we're basically in the center of the image. And then when we go out, this is the part you will notice is you can see this vignetting down here in these corners, and you can see that basically through all sides of the image. And if we go up here, you can definitely see the vignetting and the chromatic aberration. The one thing you will notice is there is a lot of lens distortion. If we go down here to the corrections tab, we can see the enable profile corrections, and I'll just click on that, and you can see the difference that makes with the vignetting and with the lens distortion. And we're at an f4, right? So we're gonna jump to the next one, and this is gonna be an f8, 16mm, basically the same thing, just we're at 1/100th of a second, just for the sole fact we had to bump our f-stop up. And you can see, like in the center, it looks a lot more clear now at f8, in my opinion. And then if we jump to these corners, they do look a lot cleaner. And a lot of the reviews I'll post below say the same thing, that once you get to the corners and you're at basically an f8, a lot more of this whole image looks better in focus than if you're at an f4. And then if we hit on the enable profile corrections, we'll just click on that, and you can see it still has that lens barrel distortion and the vignetting, but the vignetting is not nearly as bad as before, in my opinion, but neither is that barrel distortion. And then we're just gonna jump to this one, and this is an f22, and we'll just do the same thing, enable it. And you can see it's a lot better than f4, but not as good as f8. And in the center, you can see that it's definitely not as clear as the f8. We'll switch back to the f8 and jump out, jump back into the middle, and we'll go back and forth. You see the difference right there? You see how clear it is on the f8, and then how it is on the f22, and then we'll jump to the f4, and we'll go right down there again. You can see how it looks there versus how it looks on the f8 and how it looks on the f22. So f8 and f4 are gonna be your best. With this, it's gonna depend on what you're shooting. It's up to you which one you use. Just remember, like, the whole image definitely does look a lot better here. We'll jump to some of these areas, these branches, these leaves. Here's the railroad tracks right here, and this branch coming down. I'll try to find it. The same exact thing right here. Was it right here, right? So let's look at that. Here's the f4 there, and then we'll jump to here, and here it is. And I do think this does look a lot better on the f8. I zoomed in on this tree really quick so we can definitely see the difference between this is the f22 right here at 16, and this is the f8. And then this is the f4. Between the f4 and the f8 in the center, you're not going to notice that big of a difference, but you will definitely notice it with the f22. And I have read that at 35 millimeters, you can distinctly tell the difference between the f4 and the f8. And I'll throw those links below so you can look at some of those that people have done. Like I said, unfortunately did not do that because I didn't think about it when I was shooting this. So this is barn dominium my friend Jackie shot for a barn dominium company in South Carolina. And as you can tell, this is a great video. He shot at 60 frames a second, FX30. He borrowed this 16 to 35 from me for some different barn dominium listings he was doing for the company. And it's an overall great lens. I've used it for Airbnb listings. I used it for other real estate listings. And it's just one of those lenses that's great to have if this is the kind of work you do a lot of, or if you want something super wide for landscapes. Because although it is an f4, you're going to be using a tripod 90% of the time when it comes to this kind of work. So that's not going to be a big deal for you. You can crank the f-stop up to make sure the whole thing's in focus anyway, versus, like I said, you get to those outside edges when you're about an f4 and you start noticing some issues. But obviously, if you're doing real estate, you don't have to worry about that. And something like this with an FX3 that he used, the ISO natively is like 3200, so it's not going to be that bad for him. So keep that in mind. But if you're looking to only spend $400 to $500, get into the real estate game for photos and videos, and you shoot a Sony camera, it's going to be great for you. If you have a full frame camera, but if you're using like a 6000 series, obviously that's crop sensor, so this is going to be more like a 24 millimeter starting out. So keep that in mind. But this overall is a great lens.
So what do you think? For $500, do you think it's going to be worth it? And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching and just using some of your time to hang out with me and talk about this lens. I really appreciate that. And if you have a second, we just ask you to like and subscribe so that way we can get this video pushed out to more people who may be interested in saving some bucks and getting a decent lens for a great price.